Hello and welcome to my presentation, Agricultural Labor in the Columbia Basin, by myself, Alexis L, Guizar-Diaz, and my faculty mentor, Dr. Edwin Elias, from the Chicano Studies program at Eastern Washington University. So I want to begin my presentation by starting off when Latinx presence in the Pacific Northwest was first documented, and that was in the late 18th century with the Spanish expedition of Juan José Pérez Hernández and his Mexican crew. And here to the left, I have a picture of a map that the Spanish crew used on their quest here to the Pacific Northwest. And they actually set sail from the port city of San Blas in the Mexican state of Nayarit. And they were the first known non-native people to explore the coastal Pacific Northwest. And they went on to name things that we know as today, such as Mount Olympus, as Cerro Nevada de Santa Rosalia. And they traded with the local Haida people and recorded much of their observations, which paved the way for further exploration and colonization. And here to the left, I have a picture of some indigenous Haida people and of Mount Olympus. So moving forward to the 19th century, we start to see American expansion out to the west. And this expansion was really under the idea of manifest destiny. And what manifest destiny was this doctrine and belief that U.S. expansion throughout the American continent was both justified and inevitable. It was almost as if it was a divine right of America to expand out westward. And what this did, it also led to the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, the Homestead Act, and all these things really culminated together and led to this further expansion out west and into our area. And along with these imperialist ideals from the United States, it's important to remember that in 1821, Mexico had just recently gained its independence from Spain. And this new Mexican territory stretched from the present-day Oregon-California state line all the way to Central America. And the cultural heritage of this territory was comprised of Spanish, Mexican, and of indigenous influences. In Spanish, we oftentimes call that mestizo. And a large portion of these influences were introduced and really spread by those who worked as vaqueros. And what vaquero is the Spanish word for horseman or cattle herder or cowboy. And they played an extremely important role here in Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington. And these vaqueros were from the present-day American Southwest. So states like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, California, and they migrated their way up north to the Pacific Northwest and really helped establish the region's ranching tradition. And this is still something that's evident today. I mean, we can go just about anywhere in our area and we'll be able to find a cowboy hat or cowboy boots or belts, rodeos, and these are all things that were really transplanted and really ingrained into Pacific Northwest culture. And another trade that was important here, especially in the area, was mule packing. And that was of great importance here in North Idaho with all the mining operations and even here up north too as well. And then from here I want to move on to the 1900s to the 1930s. And with this came the spark of the Mexican Revolution and the start of the First World War. So need for economic goods and agricultural commodities really boomed. And with that came an increase in farm acreage, especially irrigated land, which exploded from 60,000 acres to over 14 million acres. And here to the right, I have some pictures of some old homesteads and farms that were located here in the area. So with the Immigration Act of 1917, immigration was greatly curbed, and especially with Asian countries. However, some exceptions were made to allow Mexican workers to migrate north and into the West in order to suit Western agricultural interests. And here I just have some pictures of some posters that kind of displayed kind of these barriers that were placed with this Immigration Act. And down below, I have a picture of the countries that were barred from entering into the United States at the time. An example of some of these interests here is the Utah Idaho Sugar Company. They were actually a local sugar producer here, and in 1918, the Mexican consulate in San Francisco sent a letter to the Utah Idaho Sugar Company regarding the lack of worker rights and poor labor conditions at the time. Um, in 1918, the Idaho Sugar Company actually contracted 1,500 Mexican laborers, and conditions were absolutely dismal, and racist attitudes ran rampant in the region. And as you can see here in the pictures, you can just kind of tell kind of the attitudes that were present in the area. So another example of agricultural interests really start to unfold is through the Columbia Basin Project. And of course, the Columbia Basin Project starts off up north with the Grand Coulee Dam, and it works its way down up near to the Tri-Cities, and it provides irrigation water to a vast amount of land there. And it really transformed the area, actually. And interestingly, it's a project that is still being completed. It's something that's been started since the 1930s, and it still has yet to be completed. So it's still under the works, and I'm sure we'll see more construction and activity as we go on. So with the Columbia Basin Project taking place, as well as the start of World War II, there was a high demand for agricultural laborers. And where we found these laborers was through the Brasil Program. And this program brought contracted workers from Mexico and brought them to where they were needed. And the Columbia Basin saw a big influx of these workers. And this program ran from 1942 to 1964, and it brought approximately 4.6 Mexican workers. And of course, with such influx, the region's ethnic makeup was completely transformed. So with this influx of workers in the area, labor organizing became something of vast importance. And efforts for farm labor organizing in the region initially started here in Spokane, actually, with the Industrial Workers of the World. They had a farm labor division called the Agricultural Workers Organization. And like I said, they were active here in Spokane, and then from here, they set off out to the Yakima Valley in order to take a stand for workers' rights. And their actions that they had profound implications for the future attempts to organize farm workers in the 1960s with the UFW. And we'll learn a little bit more about them here later on. So to highlight some of the labor struggles that these union organizers had at the time would be in the spring of 1933. So in the spring of 1933, growers in the Yakima Valley enforced 10-hour workdays at 10 cents an hour for men and 8 cents for women. And this is where the Agricultural Workers Union met for a few days, and they decided that on May 15th they were going to demand 35 cents an hour for 8-hour work days. But they were actually met with heavy retaliation from farmers in the surrounding communities, and they were really demonized individuals. And you can just see through these newspaper clippings that it was some actions that weren't very well liked. So from those labor efforts, we move on to the 1960s in the UFW. And what the UFW stands for is the United Farm Workers Movement. And that began in California in 1965 when Chicano workers led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta joined forces with Filipino American workers in order to strike the Delano grape growers. And just a year after that was when this movement moved north to Washington State. So in 1966, student activist Guadalupe Gamboa and Tomás Villanueva of Yakima Valley College traveled to Delano, California to meet with Cesar Chavez and to kind of learn um, how to really organize labor, how to mobilize themselves, and how to interact with surrounding communities in order to be successful in their efforts. So upon their return, they led these organization efforts and they established a farm workers clinic in the Yakima Valley, as well as a store. It was actually called the United Farm Workers Cooperative in Toppenish. And these strides went to influence further participation in the area and more student activism in the state's universities. So something to take note of is that before the UFW movement moved up to Washington State, and even before the Delano grape strikes, was that in 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Economic Opportunity Act, and it also established the Office of Economic Opportunity. And what that did is that it initiated the war on poverty. And the main aim of this was to address the harsh conditions encountered by many populations that have historically been neglected. And as on top of all this, many of the Catholic parishes in the area provided leadership training through El Cursillo. And this was something that was offered parish to parish, and it was a way for Chicanos and Mexican laborers to seek leadership roles in the community and really train them to start seeking out positions like that. So with the movement came this new consciousness, and with this new consciousness, it provided a way for Chicanos to enter the academic world. We start seeing more of Chicanos, more Latinos in our college campuses, in our universities, and a prime example would be here at Eastern Washington University. So in 1977, Professor Trejo, he was an art professor here, he and several students proposed the formation of a Chicano Studies program here on campus. And so what they did is they staged an informational sit-in for several days at the step of the university's president. And later that fall, the administration established what we have today is the Chicano Education Program. So with that, I wanted to jump into kind of the present issues that are observable today in the region, and that is of the changing nature of agricultural labor employment. And that change has been through the H-2A guest worker program. And with that, we have seen this change from domestic and migrant labor to subcontracted laborers from foreign countries, usually Latin America, especially Mexico. And something that is quite astonishing is that from 2007 to 2017, requested H-2A guest workers in Washington State has increased over 1,000%. And something to take note of with these H-2A guest workers is that they're not entitled to the same labor laws and protections that we all may enjoy, and they often aren't entitled to the same rights as well. They often hail from small rural communities in Mexico that have been heavily impacted by trade deals, drug wars, whatever it may be. And they are contracted here on a seasonal basis and are living in the small communities throughout the whole state, really. And I really encourage everyone to do a quick Google search when you have time and just read their stories, hear what they have to say, read the legal battles, the news stories. I think it's really quite important to know where our food comes from, who is really at the front lines, and really what's at stake. So here I just wanted to highlight some ideas and how we can support our farm workers here in Washington State and really throughout the entire country. So we can start by calling Governor Jay Inslee to enact emergency orders with funding dedicated to farm worker protections. We can email the Employment Security Department and demand that they stop processing and approving H-2A visa applications immediately for farms in Washington State. We can donate to nonprofits doing activist work, and in the next slide I'll have some nonprofits that do work in the area. We can also boycott farms that don't pay farm workers well or provide personal protective equipment, especially in these times with the pandemic. We can all advocate and vote for better policies for farm workers, and we can demand that growers host mandatory Know Your Right trainings. And here are some examples of some unions and some nonprofit organizations in the area that do work with farm workers and with the entire Latinx population. And with that, I want to thank you for watching my presentation today. And I want to thank the Chicano Studies program as well as the Spokane Public Libraries for this amazing opportunity. And I also want to thank the Department of Sociology and Justice Studies as well as the entire Trio McNair staff for allowing me to do this research. And I especially want to thank my faculty mentor, Dr. Edwin Elias. He has been absolutely awesome, and I wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for him. So I thank you all, and I hope to see you soon.